Mills, who's the Development Management Team Manager for items 4, 5, 6, 7 and 8. Gillian Rabb, who's the Case Officer for items 4 and 5. Emily Brown, Case Officer for items 6 and 8. Andy Hoff, Case Officer for item 7. Glenn Sharp, who is the Local Authority Solicitor, and Vicky Davies and David Smith from Democratic Services, to make sure that we're all behaving ourselves. So if I could turn to item 1 on the agenda, apologies for absence. Vicky, have we had any apologies received for absence today?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor David Iveson, and Nick Brown is his substitute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So item 2 on the agenda, minutes from the meeting held on the 6th of August 2024. These can be found on pages 5 to 10 of today's agenda. Does anyone have any comments about the minutes? So if no amendments proposed, could we have someone to move the minutes and someone to second them, please? So, Councillor Brown, seconder?
Yep.
The other Councillor Brown? Oh. Okay.
It's confusing.
Thank you.
Actually, it probably just need to be a fraction, Kevin. Were you actually at August?
No, I wasn't. No.
I don't think you probably can't second. I think it was...
You were.
Robert was there.
David there.
Robert's probably the only person who can second.
If it helps you out on this occasion, yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So if I can move on please to item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Brodigan.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to declare my interest as the member for this division, and I have been lobbied.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I'll just say on items 4 and 5, I'm a Harrogate District Foundation Trust Governor, stakeholder for North Yorkshire, and of course that involves, I don't think it's not a pecuniary interest, but I should declare it.
Okay. Councillor Williams.
Just to declare that I have on several occasions had meetings with the now applicant regarding this site, but at no stage have I discussed how I may vote on the application, and indeed most of those meetings were held prior to the lodgement of this application when Ripon City Council were exploring what could potentially be done with the site.
Okay, thank you very much. So if I could just mention also that Ripon Spa Baths is still owned by North Yorkshire Council, so if you could make a note of that, and also the Temple Gardens application is made by North Yorkshire Council. In terms of my declarations of interest, in terms of item 7, the applicant is somebody who's known personally to me, so having taken advice from our solicitors, I've been asked to step aside from chairing that particular agenda item, so Councillor Brown will step in and chair that particular item on the agenda. Okay, thank you very much. So, just moving on to our first item of business then today, which is item 4, which is a conversion of Ripon Spa Baths and Boiler Tower to form commercial units with various demolition works and replacement of existing buildings and alterations. So if I could pass over to the case officer for this one, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is good afternoon everyone. This is a full planning application for conversion of Ripon Spa Baths and Boiler Tower to form 2 commercial units and offices, including demolition of swimming pool building and replacement with single-storey extension to spa building, alterations to existing buildings, erection of new buildings to accommodate 4 residential apartments, and alterations to landscaping to link new courtyard to spa gardens. This is linked to a further item on the agenda, which is listed building application for listed building consent, which will be considered separately. So members visited the site this morning. Here's the application site identified with the red line. So just to kind of point out a few things for orientation. This is Park Street to the north. The the front of the spa baths, and the section that's proposed to be retained is this section here. You've got the spa gardens to the west, including some of the buildings that are flagged as listed buildings within the spa gardens, the War Memorial Bandstand, for example. You've got the access through onto Furby Lane here, which is where vehicular access to the proposed offices and the apartments will be taken from, and the access bridge between the hospital buildings here that's also referred to in the report.
Sorry, Chair, could I just interject at that point just to ask that you clarify that the War Memorial isn't actually within the red boundary?
No, it's not. Sorry, no, it's not.
Because for any member of the public looking at that, they might be misled into thinking that the site we're discussing contains the War Memorial.
It doesn't. Sorry, apologies for that. Yeah, I didn't realise that's not clear because the text is within the red line boundary, but the War Memorial is here within this circular area of land. The statue's here. The site does include an area of land that is within the spa gardens. That's the strip of land here, but it's just, as you'll see from some of the other plans, it's landscaping. The War Memorial is not within the site. And there are also part of one of the buildings here within the hospital site is that there's a listed building here, which is one of the older buildings that's past the hospital, and a number of the buildings on Park Street to the north are also listed and they're referred to in the report. So there's an aerial photograph of the site here, again oriented the same way, so Park Street to the north, Furby Lane to the east. You've got the front section of the spa bath building here. This is the swimming pool hall building, some of the vegetation within the park to the west, hospital buildings to the south, and here's the access to Furby Lane with the bridge that crosses it there. This is an extract from the Harrogate District Local Plan maps. This is the Ripon City Centre map extract. A couple of things to flag up on here. So the site is here. This is the spa baths building, section of the spa gardens you see to the west here, Park Street and Furby Lane. This yellow boundary here, if you can see it, that shows the boundaries. It's called the town centre boundary, but it's the boundary for Ripon City Centre as defined in the local plan. So you'll see that the spa baths building and the water tower and boiler house building, which is in this part of the site here, they're within the city centre boundary. The spa gardens and the bit of land within the site that's within the spa gardens, they're outside the town centre boundary. You can also see just about with the brown hatched marks, that's the extent of Ripon Conservation Area, so the full extent of the site is within Ripon Conservation Area. This is an extract from Ripon Neighbourhood Plan Policies map. Again, just to point out where the site is when I find it. It's here. So this area of green space here, this is the spa gardens and land beyond. This is the spa bath building here, so that's not within that designation, but there's just a bit of land within the western part of the site that's within the spa gardens. That's part of open space within the neighbourhood plan as well. And this is an extract from, this is one of the maps from the Conservation Area Appraisal for Ripon Conservation Area. There's a couple of maps that cover the site, one's about buildings. This is the landscape analysis. So again, you'll see the spa gardens here, the War Memorial, the section of, and that's actually the bandstand, the War Memorial's over here. Section of land immediately to the west, you've got tree coverage along the site frontage, and here's the southwest. The blue dotted line is a footpath, shows a footpath through the spa gardens, and members we've seen on site this morning that you can see at the moment from that, albeit behind quite dense vegetation, you can glimpse the existing swimming pool hall building from there, and you've got some key views along Park Street from the east as you're coming out of the city centre, and then through the entrance gates into the spa gardens as well. So this is the existing site plan, just to point out a few things. This is the main front section of the spa bath building, so that's the older section, built around, I think it's about 1904, 1905, turn of the 20th century. The swimming pool hall building here, which was constructed in the 1930s. This is the water tower building and the boiler house building here, and then the access onto Furby Lane. And then to compare, this is the proposed site layout plan. So as part of the proposals, it's proposed to demolish the swimming pool hall section of the building, retaining the front part of the spa bath building here. This would then be converted into two commercial units, so one occupying this part of the building with a new glazed rear extension to the rear of it, one commercial unit occupying this eastern section of the building, and then the central lobby, which is the kind of tiled entrance lobby with the fountain. That's That's proposed to be retained as kind of and open to the public during the opening hours of the commercial units, so accessible to the public so they can go in and see that. You can see there's access route proposed coming in from the park here, so removal of some of the vegetation within the park to create an access route through a courtyard that would be created by the demolition of the swimming pool building. Water tower and boiler house building here proposed to be retained and converted into offices with a meeting room. And then this is the proposed new apartment building here. We've got some more detailed plans of those as we go through. This is a more detailed site layout and really starts to show some of the information about what's proposed within the spa gardens is one of the main things this shows. So at the moment there's an area of planting within the spa gardens here. Much of that either side is proposed to be retained, and you'll see the trees proposed to be retained with the green circles or green areas here. There's a proposed new tree within the area of lawn here, tree proposed to be removed. And then this would, I think, largely be areas of lawn with some shrub plantings, some to be retained. Some new planting within the spa gardens as well, here and here. And then creating an access path through. So whereas at the moment this is kind of there's no direct link between the spa gardens and the rear of the spa baths, and you've got the swimming pool hall building here at the moment, which creates a kind of visual and physical barrier between the two. The proposals would remove that, move some of the vegetation and create a public courtyard and an access through that area, opening up the rear part of the spa baths. This is the proposed glazed rear extension to the rear of the spa baths. And there's also a glazed lobby area here proposed to the rear. This is the water tower and the proposed apartment building. On the site frontage here on Park Street, there are 2 parking spaces proposed, and they're quite faint on this plan, but there's one disabled parking bay proposed and then a further parking bay. They are proposed to largely serve the commercial units in this front part of the building. Then there's 2 parking spaces proposed for the offices in this area here, one in front of the other, and then there are 4 apartments proposed, and there are 5 parking spaces proposed in total for them. There are 3 here, and then if I just move to the next plan, which is similar but it shows the ground floor areas, you'll see there are 3 those are the 3 parking spaces externally for the apartments, and there are 2 further ones on the ground floor in a kind of undercroft within the building. This is a refuse and recycling area for storage of the bins for the apartments and the other units within the site, car parking for the offices there, and that would all be accessed via the access from Ferby Lane would serve the car parking spaces for the apartments here, and also there would be an archway under this part of the building, so at ground floor level that would be an archway leading through to the car parking spaces here, and you can just see that dotted on the plan here. What you can also see here is the extent of the swimming pool building with a red dotted line, so that will be what's proposed to be demolished there. And then you can see here, differentiated in the different colours, the 2 commercial units within the front part of the spa bath building that will be retained, and the central pump room part of the building that the public would have access to. So some elevations. This is the elevation from Park Street showing the front section of the retained spa bath building, so that would all be retained as it is. So you've got the terracotta mouldings around the building, you've got the large porte-cochere entrance porch at the front, the glazed roof lanterns. So that section of the front of the building would be retained as is. You can just see behind from Park Street, you get glimpses of the top of the water tower building, and then this is showing what you would the kind of residential apartment building that's proposed behind. This is the view that you would see from the spa gardens itself, so the proposal would remove the swimming pool hall building from here. This is the new glazed extension that's proposed to the rear of one of the one of the commercial buildings. We've got the water tower building here, and in this western elevation of that, there's a small window here at the moment, that will be removed and a new glazed elevation created there. And then this is the apartment building that's proposed here. And just comparing kind of heights of the buildings, just to kind of give an idea of context, the taller section of the residential apartment building would be kind of 2.5 stories with some 3-story sections in the gables and rooms in the roof. The ridge of that, broadly similar, if not a little bit lower than the lantern on the taller section of the spa bath building at the front. Then the eaves stepping down, and then the rear section of the building stepping down still further to break up the massing of the building. There's also, this is the glazed roof lantern that's proposed on the roof of the water tower building to provide light to the offices and the upper floor of that building. And what you see from this as well is that this is the courtyard area that we proposed to be created. On this elevation, you can't see of the apartment building, there's windows on that elevation. You've got windows here, and you've got windows, the lobby and the glazed elevation of the spa baths, creating and kind of overlooking into that and a sense of activity into that central courtyard area. This is the rear elevation of the proposed apartment building, so you see here the ridge line of this rear section just stepping down from the ridge of the main front section. This is the section that will project closest to the hospital site. If I just skip back a few slides, that's the rear section, so that's the section that's closest to the hospital buildings. There's, I think, the turning area within the hospital, just immediately to the rear of it. But what to note from this is that there's no windows proposed in that section of the building that's closest to the hospital. The larger section would be further away. There are some windows in that section, but as it's set out in the report, they're further away from the hospital buildings. And then this is the other elevation. You wouldn't, in reality, see as much of because it's certainly from Third Lane because it's obscured by other buildings. But again, you can see the front section of the spa baths retained, and just that eastern elevation of the apartment building. And then this would be the remaining rear section of the front part of the spa baths building once the swimming pool hall had been demolished. So where you've got the entrance lobby at the moment and those stained glass doors and windows that come through into here, there would be a glazed lobby created to the rear of that. And then this would project further out, and this would be a glazed extension with a flat ceiling roof to one of the commercial units. This is the proposals for the boiler tower, so much of that will be retained as is, but you've got the glazed roof lantern proposed there, which is just set in slightly from the existing parapet with quite lightweight glazed structure. This is a kind of bordered panel at the moment, some glazing proposed in there, and then facing into the courtyard, this glazed western elevation. And what you can also see from here is the section showing the positions of the new floors within the building. It's covered in my update at the end, but just to flag it up while I've got this slide up, there's been a recent, very minor update to this drawing, which was as previously proposed. You'll see that there's a kind of stair lobby being created within the building around the staircase, and that'll be partitioned off. One of the partitions was cutting across this window here, and that's been relocated so that it coincides with the section of brickwork here, and it's not cutting across the window. So on one of the conditions that relates to the plans, one of the amendments is to this plan, and that's the change to it. So as you see, it's a minor change to that. And then the apartment building here proposed in the rear of the site. So this is the northern elevation, which would face the rear of the retained spa baths building. The report mentions the kind of repeated bay features, very vertical features with the gables above, characteristic feature of other buildings within Ripon Conservation Area, creates that sense of rhythm and verticality to the building that was considered to be sympathetic, but whilst also incorporating some larger areas, glazing, some balconies, to kind of reflect that it's a more contemporary building, but still reflecting those historic features that are characteristic of the historic areas of Ripon. You can see it in the context here of the water tower. Again, that's that rear elevation with facing the hospital. And there's a proposal as part of the construction of the apartment building to try and reuse as far as possible some of the bricks from the demolished swimming pool building. And you'll note there's a condition recommended that relates to materials and a method statement for how those works to demolish the building would be carried out to try and retain some of that and reuse it in the new apartment building. And then a kind of 3D visual of what you would see from the pavilion, which is the kind of cafe at the end of the spa gardens, or within the spa gardens. Vegetation and tree planting retained either side within the spa gardens, but that central section removed, creating this courtyard overlooked by the apartments looking northwards, the glazed section of the water tower building and the boiler house there, and then the glazed rear extension at the back of the spa baths, with the front section retained there, and creating this courtyard with a pedestrian access route into it. A few photos just for context. So this is the front of the spa baths building that would be retained, and you can see the lanterns, the windows, the terracotta moulding details. This is the porte cochere, the entrance porch here. This is the central entrance lobby that's proposed to be retained. So as part of the proposals, and this relates more to the building application, but I'll cover it here. It's proposed to retain the tiling, the entrance porch inside, the fountain here, the stained glass within the windows as part of the proposals. This is the existing swimming pool hall, so this is the section that's proposed to be demolished. This is just an example from one of the changing rooms of where within other parts of the building kind of more recent partitions and recent additions have been made to parts of the building as well. From the spa gardens, this is one of the views from the spa gardens. So here's the views of the swimming pool hall building at the moment. That's what's proposed to be demolished. Some of this planting in the central area would be taken out but replaced with a pedestrian access path with lawns and grass replanted around it to reflect and retain that kind of sense of planting within the gardens, but next to the paths you've got these lawned areas and these relatively narrow pedestrian paths that weave through the gardens. And the parks team, that's been kind of designed in discussion with the council's parks team, who are happy with those proposals. And there will be conditioned to cover the details of that landscaping. This is the rear of the spa baths building, so that's the part of the building we proposed, just to kind of show the height of that relative to, I'll just leave the existing height of that. This is the side of the spa baths, and then this is that section of the water, this is the water tower, the boiler house part of that, which will be retained. That's that bit here. So new areas of glazing in here and a larger area of glazing. That's that western elevation that faces into the courtyard. This is a view from Furby Lane, just showing the boiler tower building. You can glimpse over the hedge there and through the gate. And then this is the existing staircase within the boiler tower building. So that's proposed to be removed and replaced with a new staircase as part of the reconfiguration of the floors in that building. The access from Furby Lane here, so this is a one-way street, so it runs from here in this direction, so from right to left as you look at this photo. Access would be into there. This is the spa bath building proposed to be removed, and you'd have the apartment building coming slightly further back than that, parking for that, access to the parking for the water tower, the offices in the water tower. There's a headroom height on there. It's been clarified on the plans, so the architect has clarified on the plans that the maximum headroom of that, or the headroom under that bridge, is 3.7 metres, and that's what the application's been considered on that basis. And then this is looking from the site down towards some of the hospital buildings to the south, including the older building, parts of the buildings in that part of the hospital. So there are a few updates since the reports were published. There's been some slight tweaks to some of the plans to just clarify a couple of points, and also I'll just run through some further discussions on a couple of the conditions as well. So this is just to reflect the revised wording of those. So I've kept the condition numbers the same as they are in your reports pack. So condition 2 is the approved plans condition. A couple of corrections. This plan wasn't scaling correctly, so it's been updated. So it scales correctly now, but coupled with the boiler houses to reflect that change to the partition internally, which I mentioned. And this plan's been updated just to clarify that that fountain in the central lobby is to be retained, so that a few changes to that one. This one has just been amended just to clarify the wording a bit, just to clarify what works can and can't take place, because once I'd reviewed it, it didn't seem as clear as perhaps it could be, so that's just updated to reflect that, just to clarify what above ground level means and which works can and can't take place. The bits in red I've included are the changes compared to the relative conditions in your reports packs. This one is condition 18. Again, I just clarified it was works and development. None of that should commence until the licence has been obtained. And I'm also suggesting we're also suggesting an additional condition, just to make it really clear that what the height restriction is at the site entrance, so that any drivers using that entrance and coming under that access bridge where the bridge runs between the hospital buildings, that's signage reflecting the correct height of that bridge is installed, so that drivers are aware of the height restriction and pay regard to it. So that's an additional condition to the ones that are suggested in the reports pack. We'll just come back to the site plan there, and I'll leave that there. A couple of other updates. So I think it's referred to in the report that the arboricultural officer, the tree officer, has been involved in the discussions with the park officer, but since the report was published, the arboricultural officer has now formally commented as well. They've advised no objections. They've mentioned the proposed tree loss and lower quality specimens will be replaced as part of a conditioned landscaping scheme, and there is already a condition recommended to cover the landscaping. They've advised there have been negotiations with the parks manager, which has resulted in positive amendments, which result in a supportable scheme, is what the arboricultural officer has commented. And as I say, there's a landscaping condition recommended in the conditions. A couple of other, just to mention as well, because it's not mentioned in the report, so the buildings are listed as set out in the report. The spa baths is also designated as an asset of community value. So in planning terms, that is capable of being a material planning consideration. So I understand that it means that there's a right for community groups to bid to kind of express an interest in the building, but it's my understanding that no written request was received within the relevant timescale from any potential bidders as part of that process. That's more to do with the kind of potential sale of the building. In planning terms, it can be capable of being a material planning consideration. The application in this case has been for the development proposed has been considered on its own merits and based on the specific development proposed. As is noted in the report, there are considered to be community benefits associated with the scheme in terms of reinstating that connection between the spa baths and the spa gardens, which was there historically, bringing the buildings, listed buildings which have been vacant for some time, back into use, opening parts of it up to public use and public access, and the provision of new commercial units within the city centre and also new apartments. So those benefits are set out in the report. A couple of other slight changes to a couple of the conditions, so I'll just refer you to conditions 8 and 9 in your reports pack, which relate to visibility displays for vehicles and pedestrian visibility. As they're currently worded, they are set out where they specify particular visibility displays to be provided. On the plans, there are existing visibility displays shown, and it's intended to retain the existing visibility at the site entrance. No works are proposed to change the existing visibility at the site entrance. And there's some slight differences between what those plans show as the existing to be retained and what the originally suggested condition from Highways was in terms of the length of those displays and what was required. So it's just to clarify, those conditions have been reworded. Highways are happy with the existing visibility, so they've confirmed that they're happy for the existing visibility to be retained, but the suggestion is that those conditions are reworded. Firstly, for the vehicular one, to require full details of the existing visibility to be submitted so that we understand exactly what the existing visibility is. We've got kind of top-down visibility in terms of the distance, but in terms of the height of any obstacles within those visibility displays, we've asked for that to be clarified, so we've got kind of three-dimensional idea of what the visibility is. And then we're certain, when we require that to be retained, we're certain what it is we're asking to be retained. So we're asking for those details to be submitted, but and then the pedestrian visibility displays, rather than specifying that anything particular has to be provided, Highways again are happy to refer, with regard to those visibility displays, happy for that just to refer to the submitted plan. So that condition would be just amended to say 2 by 2 metre by 2 metre pedestrian visibility displays should be provided in accordance with the details on the submitted site plan, rather than specifying particular. Those conditions have been checked by the applicant, by the agent, and they've also been checked by Highways, and Highways have confirmed that they're happy with the suggested rewording. So it just it provides greater clarity in terms of what's actually to be proposed and provided, and that it's the existing visibility that's to be retained, and Highways are happy with that. The recommendations and other suggested conditions are in the report. It's recommended the application is approved for the reasons set out in the report, subject to the conditions suggested. Happy to answer any questions or clarify any points. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Williams, we covered first. Councillor Williams, Councillor Brotherton and Councillor Brown.
I'm assuming we're just on questions at the moment. Yeah. At the moment, the disabled parking space is virtually adjacent to the entrance to the gardens, and on the application we have before us, it moves substantially away from the entrance to the gardens. This is the only point I've made in reference to the application previously, in that it makes it much harder for anybody with mobility issues to actually access parts of the spa gardens by moving the disabled parking space into that location. And I can't quite understand the logic for it, to be perfectly honest. there is an assumption, I think, amongst many able-bodied people that disabled means that people are in a wheelchair, when in actual fact most people with disabilities have mobility issues rather than them actually being in a wheelchair. And extending the distance that they've got to walk to gain access to the community facilities in the spa gardens, when in actual fact the parking disabled space can be left where it is, doesn't seem to me to make any logic. Could I have an explanation as to why it is being moved?
As far as it goes, the application, it's where it's proposed as part of the application, and Highways have considered it on that basis and advised it's acceptable. So in terms of the reason for moving it, I'm not entirely sure. It's just that's where it was when the application came in, and it's been assessed on that basis. I am aware. Could I just clarify, Councillor, where it is at the moment? Is it in this part of the site at the moment?
It's in front of the gates.
Here in front of the gates. I wonder, as part of the application, there's been some discussions about, at the moment, I think there was some parking as part of the spa baths along the front of the site, and my understanding was that that was for the spa baths. It might have been used incidentally by people accessing the gardens as well. But that use continued once the baths had closed and it's now been fenced off. In terms of access to it, this area here, as I understand it, is also used by parks to get vehicles into the spa gardens. And in looking at trying to lay out the site, my understanding is that there was more space for parking here, and actually, in terms of ensuring that access was retained, that bollards are proposed along that part of the site, and that perhaps there wasn't space to retain it in that part of the site. Although obviously, as you say, it's there at the moment. I don't know is the honest answer as to why it was moved. As I say, it's proposed in that location as part of the application for the use of the buildings as commercial units, and in that location and for that use it's considered to be acceptable by Highways.
I suppose ultimately my question is it possible to have the disabled space as is on the application here, but retain the current existing disabled space, which actually is used by many disabled visitors to the spa gardens, so that we're not impacting upon the ability for visitors and residents to access and use the spa gardens.
It's not a question that's been raised, as I say, because the parking is considered to be acceptable, so there's one space provided for disabled users of the building. In terms of it being reconfigured, that's not a question that's been asked.
I'm just looking actually at Google Street View actually of where this is and where the disabled parking space is. It does have an impact actually on narrowing the width of the path at that point to get round without going onto the road, and potentially that could be an issue with people with particularly large prams, etc. So it's not in quite an ideal place with where it is really reducing the width of the path at that point to get into the spa gardens from Park Street.
I would say as well, just looking at it on Google Street View, and I'll try and I'll see if it's on my photo of the front of the site. It's here, isn't it, at the moment? What I would say, I think just looking at that where it is at the moment, is that's not marked up formally as a disabled parking space, so it's not got the hatchings that you would usually expect with a disabled parking space, and I think it did have.
I can assure you it had, because I've used it frequently. My mother was disabled before she died, and if it had been the other side, she wouldn't have access to the spa gardens. I can speak from personal experience.
No, I'm not going to speak, no.
Should we not just ask officers to look at it again with an open mind? I think that's as much as we're asking for.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
But then do we have to condition that?
We can come to that.
Yeah.
So just looking at sort of the van on the street view, and if there is a car parked there, it does narrow the path quite significantly in that location. Actually, it's a bit of a pinch point that is going to present an obstacle to get round.
Councillor Brannigan.
Thank you, Chair. And my question is with regards to the ownership. The building is still in the ownership of North Yorkshire Council. Can I ask what the status is at the moment of the changeover from North Yorkshire Council to the potential developers, and is it reliant on the planning application?
It's a separate matter to the planning application, but my understanding is that the building is still in the council's ownership at the moment.
Yeah, what I wanted to know is what is the status? Okay, it's still owned by North Yorkshire Council, but is the potential sale of it, reliant on this application being successful?
I'm not sure that's a material to planning consideration.
Okay.
Do
it's a curiosity question.
No, you put it perfectly, Chair. Sorry, this is a freestanding planning application. It's determined in the usual way. The contractual arrangements or prospective sale are not material to the assessment of the planning application.
Okay.
But my understanding is the sale's conditional on the planning permission being granted.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to know.
Have you got any other questions? Okay. Councillor Brett.
I've got two. First relates to condition 4, which is restriction on the use of land for gardens and growing food. I don't understand why the condition is that the area of land should not be used for the growing of food, including fruit and vegetables. Surely if a community group came forward and said we're going to do a community garden type approach, make the food available for free, it's the sort of stuff that councils would wish to encourage. Here we've actually consciously banned it, even if there's a national food shortage. So I would like to remove that condition when we get to it. I'd just like to know why that's there. The second question is, I can't see a condition that relates to the energy and sustainability points. Have I missed it? Or should it be there somewhere that those energy and sustainability promises, which look quite good, are actually enforceable by us? I can't find that, and I'm assuming I need to try and put in an extra condition if we want to secure that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. I'll take those two in turn. So, condition 4, restriction on use of land for gardens and growing food, is set out in the reason for the condition. That's a condition that was discussed with the Environmental Health Officer. And that's on the basis that the contaminated land report has been submitted, or reports have been submitted with the application. Now, they show that the level of contamination within the site it's acceptable to be used as landscaping within a kind of park and a public park, but it's not been demonstrated to be at a satisfactory level that you would allow you to grow food in it. So there's a difference between it being part of the park and lawns and actually grow food in it. So if you were to do that, you'd need to demonstrate that, or it might need further remediation. So it's acceptable for the use that's proposed because it's not proposed to be used for gardens. So it's just to cover that off.
Okay, I've got
that. In terms of the energy and sustainability, apologies, I realise that that's not listed in the approved plans condition. So a note was provided by the agent as part of the application in terms of what's proposed, but that's absolutely a condition that can be included. So perhaps along the lines of at the relevant time, before the development of ground level commences, a report based on the principles set out in that statement, setting out in more detail what the energy and sustainability proposals are, to be submitted and approved in writing and then carried out in accordance with that.
I'll figure out something in the next one.
Yeah, that's not a problem at all. I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick clarification.
Yeah.
How many car parking spaces are there for the offices?
2.
2?
Yes.
Is that going to be enough?
So I've realised my mind has been on all along. Yes, so I checked this with Highways. So they're 3 quite small. It's 3 small offices and a meeting room. So it's not a huge. You've seen on site this morning how big that kind of water tower and boiler house is. So it's not a huge development. With 2 spaces, one in front of the other, and Highways are happy that that's enough because it's a city centre location as well, so you've got access to other car parks nearby, you've got public transport, it's a very accessible location, that in that location the two parking spaces.
It was when the expression meeting room was mentioned, I just wondered whether there was going to be enough. Because people don't want to be walking half a mile or whatever.
No, I understand that. I think it's more kind of, yes, it might be a meeting room where I suppose you might have people coming in from elsewhere, but because of the accessibility of the location and proximity to those other car parks, and because of the constraints of this site as well, there's not, a lot of extra space within the site. So as a balance between preserving the setting of the listed building and making sure that you've got enough parking within the site and taking into account what's there already nearby and bus routes and things, highways were happy with the amount proposed.
So we don't want a problem along Furby Lane where, the car park there is very full many times, and if there's a lower amount of spaces for this development, then it may impact on the other car park.
Yeah, and mindful of that, some of the concerns that have been raised about potential for blocking the access from Furby Lane to the hospital, for example, so some of that's covered in the report, and it was with that in mind that I checked with highways, to try and avoid people parking on the access road and in the car parks nearby, and perhaps it's used by the hospital or on Furby Lane, or I understand that it is it's meant to be used by the hospital. So to try and at least make sure that wouldn't be an issue, I checked with highways that there was enough parking within the site, and they were satisfied that there would be, so that there shouldn't be an issue in that regard, as I understand that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else with any more questions for the case officer? Okay, so if there's no more questions, we'll move on to Councillor Brodigan.
I just indicated I want to speak.
All right. We have two people speaking to us today. We have Councillor Peter Horton, who'll be speaking on behalf of the Ripon City Council. We also have Andrew Birmingham, who is the agent for the applicants. Just for the benefit of clarity, Andrew Birmingham's request to speak did come in after hours, so to speak. However, he had been in some open dialogue with the case officers and was waiting for a response before his formal request to speak. So on this occasion, we're not setting a precedent, but we're going to exercise our discretion and allow Andrew to speak to us, also given the status of the building and the public interest. I think we can agree that it's important to have the agent speak to us today. So if I could ask Councillor Horton to come and speak to us first. You have 3 minutes to speak. We are quite strict on this, I'm afraid, and it's 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, members. Ripon City Council were somewhat concerned when the spa baths closed that the site would fall into dereliction. There didn't seem to be any movement or any proposals coming forward. The City Council had an aspiration to try and develop this as a community centre, but it really turned out that this was not financially viable, that we couldn't do it. So we're very glad to see a developer who's come along with plans to regenerate the whole site. And it does involve varied uses, even including residential, which of course may help our housing situation in Ripon. So basically all I'm here to do today is to say that the City Council fully supports the aspirations of the developer, and we hope that you will look at this recommendation before you to approve and pass it so that development can take place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horton. If I could ask Andrew Birmingham to speak to us next, please. Once again, 3 minutes from when you start speaking. Thank you.
Okay, Andrew Birmingham, Architecture AB, acting as agent. We've just listened to the summary from the case officer. I believe it's a very good summary of the application, so we only really wouldn't wish to answer any of the questions that have been raised. So Councillor Williams raised a question about the disabled parking bay. This was brought up before the application went in, but unfortunately dealing with highways, any disabled spaces that we have to show must meet current standards, and we've had to, they have the hatch zone all the way around them now, and that can't clash with any footways running past. and in that position that it is currently, we just can't physically fit it onto the site. So we had to move it to the other side of the entrance. But to try and supplement that, we have added a second parking space in, which, although it hasn't got all the hatch zones, would be kept back as a ambulance disabled space, so that although it's a bit further away, there is going to be a second parking space retained. And one of the benefits of the frontage is that at the moment when cars are parking on there, there isn't actually a public footpath maintained along the road. We're setting the bollards in 2 metres, so that there is a full 2 metre depth to the pedestrian footpath along Park Street. Then the other question was about sustainability, and we have submitted a statement regarding policy CC4, which is our approach to the scheme. It is slightly limited by the fact that most of the buildings are listed, but certainly the new build will be built to standards in advanced building regs, and we're quite happy for that statement to be added to the condition list. I think that's everything that hasn't been answered so far.
Okay, yeah, thank you. We can't put questions back to you, unfortunately,
That's
but
fine.
if that's all you have to say, then thank you very much for your time. Okay, so if we could move on to the debate at the moment. Does anyone want to kick us off? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. As Councillor Horton has alluded, and I just want to reference the fact so that members of the public at large are well aware. Because certainly there was, at the time of the vacation of the site by Harrogate Council, public calls for the site to be used for community leisure recreational purposes. And so the City Council exercised its right under the community asset process to explore what may or may not be viable at this particular site. One of the problems in terms of current legislation as opposed to its previous use is that for leisure purposes now it would require far more car parking spaces than you can actually provide on the site. And it became very clear quite quickly that the financial risk to the City Council would be enormous in terms of taking on a redevelopment of this particular site, given all of the issues that have been raised in the officer's report today, namely aspects of the frontage which are listed, the various other issues in terms of the landlocking with the hospital site. So I just want it to be quite clear so that history will have its footnote to make it quite clear that its purpose as a leisure site within the city and an attempt to try and retain it as such was fully explored, and it simply isn't in any way, shape or form financially viable. So we come to where we are today, and I'm glad that we are now where we are today, and I'm grateful for the explanation from the applicant in relation to the disabled space, which again I wanted to tease out so that in future when disabled residents raise issue, again that issue has been addressed here today, and the answer provided as to why this space is actually being moved. So in terms of the merits of the application itself, well, they are largely picked up within the officer report, and you don't need me to repeat and rehearse those arguments. But I commend the applicant for having worked with Ripon City Council throughout this process, and with other groups within the city to try and ensure that the application that's come forward today carries the broadest possible support within the local community. And I think that it's clear and fair to say that the applicant has a proven track record of developing sites which have fallen into disrepair and dereliction within the city, and doing a first-class job in bringing those redundant buildings back into proper commercial and successful venture. And you only actually need to go next door, where our king and freeman of the city would have described the building next door as a carbuncle previously. But we now have a redeveloped site which blends perfectly into the market square, and which has brought an empty derelict building back into successful commercial use. So I think the applicants have a clear proven track record of making projects such as this work within the city of Ripon, and are to be commended for it. And on that basis, I'd like to support the application that we have before us today, and I'd be happy to move the officer recommendations.
Councillor Brolly, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. As divisional member for Spa Ward, I welcome this application. Spa Ward is undergoing somewhat of a renaissance at the moment. We've all seen the renovation of the Spa Hotel. There's new ownership of the cafe in the park, and I believe that this renovation of the spa baths would certainly add to the economic development of the area, as well as the overall look of it. What I welcome about this application is it is returning part of the building to its former design layout by reopening up the spa gardens at the back, and reconstructing the glazed area that would actually showcase the stained glass windows that are within the Grade 2 listed building. I believe the conversion is sympathetic, and that the developers have actually taken note of comments that have been made both by residents and by the City Council, as well as the planners, and have amended their application accordingly. As has been stated before, the developers actually have a good track record of sympathetic developments of buildings within Ripon, and so I am glad that they are taking responsibility for this building as well. It's sad to see the state that the spa baths has fallen into in such a short period of time since its closure, and I think this application is long overdue to actually coming before the planning committee for us to actually make that decision. I wholeheartedly support it, and I hope my colleagues on the planning committee do so as well, to bring the spa baths building back into retaining its original purpose of being a building for the leisure and recreation purposes of residents, as indeed it will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brolly and Councillor Brown.
Yeah, really positive, isn't it? I mean, it's not often you get the civic society saying the scheme is great. Normally they're very critical of conservation area changes, etc., and they seem very keen. But that wonderful frontage, which is one of the joys of Ripon, gets retained and is safe. The view from the side from the Spa Gardens looks better than you've currently got. I think what will be there when they've finished is better than what was there at the start. That entrance hall, you've got the access to that and the wonderful ceiling and fireplace and all that stuff. Really, really great. So the only thing I would ask is that those who propose and second the motion would add under condition 14 that an energy and sustainability plan will be submitted and approved prior to commencement of works, which is a fairly simple condition which just secures what the developer said. So I'll repeat that: an energy and sustainability plan will be submitted and approved prior to commencement, to go into condition 14, one of those bullet points. Would that be acceptable to the proposals?
I don't have any issue. I'm sure the applicant knows.
Councillor Lord.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to agree and disagree with my colleague to my left here. I'm glad to see the buildings retained of some of them. I think it's tragic to lose the pool. I've swum in pools in far less of a state than this. It looks fantastic. So it's a tragedy to have it dug out. So I'm disappointed with that. I take it that a lot of effort has been made by the community to try and save it in some shape or form, but okay, that hasn't been successful. So just a couple of minor points. I noticed the car park in the town hall there that I've walked twice today. It's 0.2 of a mile, 3 minutes walk. So I think there's plenty of car parking in Ripon. So I thank the councillors for providing that in Ripon. So car parking shouldn't be a problem at all, or people attending meetings. And they'll have a nice walk past the independent bookshop there, and might even make a purchase. But I would say I disagree particularly. My colleague here said it looks better from the gardens now, and I think the planting scheme, as Civic Society mentioned it, they have concerns. I don't know why so much of it's being removed. I can only think it's because the people in these lovely new flats want to look out in the gardens. Because all I can tell from looking at the slides are that they, at least half of those borders are being cut. The trees being taken out, I don't know why, there's plenty of space to leave it there. A little one, you can see a little one's being moved, it's on the right hand side, it's probably the south. So a little one's being put over there to the right where Miss Rand's got her cursor, obviously not blocking the view from the site. I think it's unnecessary. I'm very disappointed that so much of those borders have been cut. I think it's unnecessary. Didn't want to say anything else. It says to create an access route. There is a path through there already. It's just making a wider access route. Apparently, so once a year for the ceremony, there might be somewhere to stand. I accept the ceremony is important. I'll be attending mine this year, but really, is that the main point? So, just a few observations. I'm not going to stop the application going ahead, am I? But I don't agree with so much vegetation being cut away. I don't think it's necessary.
Councillor Williams, you've got your hand back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but yeah, as a Riponian, can I just say that I think the removal of the vegetation, given that it's not very good quality vegetation, and returning the actual gardens and the building site to its original historic setting is actually a major positive of the application that we have before us today. That vegetation that's there is almost self-seeded. And as has been described by the arboriculturist reporters, laying in value in environmental terms. We're looking for a really quality scheme that enhances what Councillor Brodigan has referenced, which is a renaissance of the city spa quarter. And opening up the site and actually having it properly visible is all part of that, rather than having it shrouded behind some shrubbery. So I'm sorry, but I disagree fundamentally with you over that particular point. And I don't think it's a tragedy that pool is not being kept either, given that we have a pool which Harrogate Council and now North Yorkshire Council have spent many millions of pounds over budget on delivering. So I don't think we want to be spending more money retaining pools in Ripon. We want to be bringing dereliction back into proper use, and this application does exactly that. So I welcome your opinions, Councillor Nolan, but I couldn't in any way, shape or form concur with them.
I think the only tragedy about the pool is the ongoing debacle in terms of the ongoing problems with the new swimming pool. As regards removing the vegetation in terms of giving people increased access on Remembrance Sunday, I think for the people of Ripon that's actually really important. Remembrance Sunday is commemorated in Ripon like nowhere else really. And so I think that the people of Ripon would be prepared to sacrifice a few shrubs so that day could be properly commemorated. Councillor Brown.
I think the prime concern about removal of vegetation is that red circle around what is quite a good quality tree and which might actually be helpful in the middle of the remembrance events because you get some shelter from the Ripon weather. And I think that's actually quite a good quality piece of vegetation. So I would ask that officers perhaps look at whether the openness that people are asking for can be retained and we don't lose that one particular reasonable quality tree.
Councillor Nick Brown.
Thank you. I'm pleased that we've now Councillor Nick Brown and Councillor Harry Brown, because it does get misreported sometimes. Can I just say that I agree with what's been said by my colleague, that vegetation can change and evolve over time, and I'm sure whatever happens there, that will happen. I'm very happy about what's proposed. But can I just say also that the officer report, I think, is very comprehensive, and well done to the officers for doing that. It's very clear what's happening. I am a supporter of Ripon. I have to say that I've never actually been in the spa baths before, and it's probably to my detriment. But having gone round it this morning, it's not before time that something is happening on this site. And I think what has been proposed by the developer is a good plan, and the sooner we get it built, the better for Ripon. And because the record of this developer has been very good, and long may that continue, I hope, because Ripon does need new development to grow and become prosperous again. And I hope this is a stage along the way to that happening. So I am quite happy to second what Councillor Williams' proposal.
You're thirding.
Oh, sorry, were you before me? I didn't hear that. But anyway, I would have done it if you hadn't. So long may it continue, developing Ripon as a good place to live and work and be a tourist attraction. And I hope this goes ahead very quickly.
Does anyone else have anything they wish to ask add at the moment? Okay. So I concur with the general comments that have been made. I think it's a fantastic opportunity to bring a beautiful building back into life and become an asset again, instead of watching it fall into disrepair. So if I understand rightly, what we're now going to do is we're going to move to the vote, which has been proposed by Councillor Williams, seconded by Councillor Brown. Councillor Brodigan. But we're going to ask for an additional condition to be attached to the planning permission. Glenn, would you just like to clarify what the additional condition is?
I think there is an additional conditional amendment to condition 14, which is that what I've got written down from Councillor Brown is that there should be an additional one, which is an energy and sustainability plan is to be submitted by the applicant and approved by the council prior to commencement.
That's correct.
To obviously then ensure that whatever is agreed is carried out. I think that our thoughts were that would be a standalone condition, because I think Condition 14 was that external material thing. So it's a slightly different thing. So we thought it's its own standalone condition.
Okay. So that would be Condition 15. 14.
I think it'd be Condition 28. Condition 28.
Okay. All right, before I confuse myself too much, all those in favour, if we could raise their hands, please. So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So that's passed subject to the conditions as laid out before. Thank you. So if we could move on quickly to the next agenda item, where am I?
Page 57.
Number 6, no, not number 5, which is the listed building application, follows on from the application adjustment. So we have that the case officer.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, yes, just swapping my presentations around. So this is an application for listed building consent for the conversion of Ripon Spa baths and boiler towers from 2 commercial units and offices, including demolition of the swimming pool building and replacement with single extension to the spa building, and internal and external alterations to the existing buildings. And it's those internal alterations in addition to the external stuff that's part of what's part of the listed building application as well. And there's also obviously the proposal for the new building to accommodate all apartments and alterations to the landscaping, which are part of the description of the listed building application. So much of this is going to be the same as you've already seen, but I'll just try and draw out what the specific things are that listed building consent is sought for, and there's a couple of differences to some of the plans to provide some extra information on that.
Is there anything we won't have picked up from reading the papers?
Yeah,
we just keep it to that.
Yeah,
I don't want us to cut through. Is there anything that we additionally need to know?
No, because it seems logical if you pass 4, you've got to pass 5.
I was only going to share the demolition plan, which wasn't part of the previous one, and just clarify, but if you're happy.
Chair, in the interest of brevity, can I propose that we adopt the recommendations?
I think for the sake of completeness, I need to ask the speakers whether they want to speak again, because of the type of I would have thought possibly that they might not want to speak, but I do need to ask them if they'd like to speak again. Councillor Horton, would you like to speak again?
No, Chair. We are in support of the development of the scheme and the acceptance of the listed building application.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Birmingham, is there anything that you want to add? Are you happy for us just to... Okay. Right, so if we move on to the debate, would anyone like to debate anything about this application? I'm quite happy with it. Would anyone like to propose it?
Yes, I like it.
Okay. Anyone like to second it? Councillor Birmingham. So if we move straight to the vote, is to go with the officer's recommendation for approval subject to conditions. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. The quickest one we've ever done.
Yes. Now see if you can beat it with number 6.
Yeah.
if any members of the public who are here specifically just for those applications want to leave, you can do so now. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you do want to leave, please do so quietly. Thank you. So we're going to have a slight change in the running order. We're going to now take agenda item, the application in respect of Glass Houses Mill. The reason we're doing that is because there may be quite a few members of the public here today that specifically for that agenda item. So rather than wait everyone, make everyone wait until the end, we're going to deal with that next. Okay. We're just going to wait for Councillor Andrew Brown to join us. Councillor Williams unfortunately has to leave us for a prior engagement. Thank you to your participation up until now. Thanks very much.
Are we on the 7th?
Page 91. I picked that book for Lily and I used to be in my car now. Are you in anywhere?
I might do in 7th here as well.
Absolutely.
Where they need to be. I forgot I need to step aside for this one, so I'm going to pass over to Councillor Brown and I'll go and sit outside for a few minutes.
I don't think there's any reason why you can't sit inside if you wish to. I don't think there's any. I don't think anybody's going to be intimidated by your presence.
You're not going to be intimidated by what I might have to say or legal answers or anything like that.
Okay, can I just perhaps remind people that this is, the way this works is it's a formal meeting of the planning committee and the opportunities to contribute are restricted to the people who've already notified us they wish to speak, and we're not always free to make every decision we might wish to make. We're following planning rules. Could I go to the case officer to do the report on the Glass Houses Mill?
Thank you, Chairman. This is a Section 73 application to vary conditions numbers 2, 8, 23 of the original enabling consent and delete conditions 34 and 36 of that permission to allow the consideration of revised plans. I just realised, looking at the description of the development, it's quite mealy-mouthy. Basically, the original enabling consent approved 42 units in total. That was 32 units in phase 1, which is in the main mill building, and 10 in phase 2. The proposal now in front of members is again to retain the 32 units in the main mill building and 18 new units in phase 2. So it provides 50 residential units in total as opposed to 42. Turning to the plans. Oops. Just demagnify this.
Could you go to full screen?
Okay. Right, sorry about that. It's the first time I've done planning committee here for some time. I don't know, pressing the buttons when I'm speaking. Right, you should have in front of you the first slide, which is an extract from the local plan, which shows the proposal map for Glasshouses Village. The application is the application site is located on the southern area of the village. The red edge actually shows the development limit for the village. So the site, which is approximate position of the thank you, that's better. That's better. I have fat fingers, yes. The application site is located at the southern part of the village, indicated by the arrow, forming the Glasshouses Mill complex. As you can see from the slide, the red edge is the development limit for the village, and we're wholly within the development limit for the settlement. This extract is from the conservation area appraisal, which identifies the buildings as, well, in this particular slide, as local historic buildings. Since this was produced, they are actually Grade 2 listed buildings. They're buildings indicated by the red, which is the main building, the warehouse, stable block, and the barn. And I'll refer to those during the presentation. You can also see areas within the conservation area statement, which are areas of enhancement, and they're indicated by the lime colour. So in context then, so we have the main mill building, which has been substantially completed and converted into residential use. That's indicated by the arrow. That forms phase 1, together with the mechanic store and the building known as the pug mill, which are located to the eastern elevation of the mill building itself. The warehouse is located to the north of the site, the stable block indicated by the arrow, and the barn again by the arrow. The scheme itself provides now for 50 units, so we're converting the warehouse to form 6 residential units, the stables to form 2, and a new build block indicated by the arrow, which provides a further 10 units.
Sorry, which arrow?
You see that?
I can't see it.
Which arrow? There's been no arrow.
There's been no arrow. I thought it was me.
It's the block to the immediate east of the main mill. It's showing my arrow shown here, it's not showing yours.
Thank you. That's an arrow.
Oh, that's That's really helpful, it's not showing on mine now. That's the new build block of 10 units. The scheme, phase 1, consists, as mentioned earlier, of this section of the site. Phase 2 is the warehouse, the stables, and the new build block. The application seeks to regularise a number of anomalies in phase 1, where the developer hasn't carried out the development in accordance with the approved plans. These relate specifically to boundary treatments, shared amenity space, and surface materials within the curtilage of phase 1. Phase 2, as I touched upon earlier, represents a revised scheme of conversion of the actual buildings themselves. So, looking at phase 2, which is the warehouse, this is the proposed elevations for the units. This is now the enabling consent, and the extant consent, which could be implemented tomorrow, provides 5 units. This scheme provides 6. There's the layout, internal layouts, and some photographs just to show the front elevation as it stands at the moment of the warehouse building. The rear elevation, and again a little bit further back, showing again the rear elevation and its relationship to houses towards the rear. An element of the proposal is also to reroute the public right-of-way, which currently follows the rear elevation of the stable block and continues to the rear of the warehouse, past the existing residential properties to the west of the site. I will show you a slide showing the proposed rerouting of that public right-of-way as we move through the presentation. The stable block is to be converted into 2 new residential units. On the original enabling consent, these were 4 office blocks. So it's actually a reduction in terms of intensification by provision of 2 residential units. There's the elevations, so again the rear elevation remains blank where it runs along the public right-of-way, and you've got the internal elevations there showing how the building will be converted. This slide shows the current condition of the stable block building, and that's the northern elevation of the building itself. The new build block is located in the north-south access to the immediate east of the pub mill and the eastern flank of the Glasshouses Mill building itself. It's constructed a 2.5-storey, 3-storey development. There has been a previous listed building approval on the site approved under 190178 LB, which has actually given listed building consent for approval of a similar sized building in this location. It's more or less the same mass, same scale, as give or take half a metre here, half a metre there. It's very much of a muchness. Elevation-wise, this is the front elevation which faces the mill building itself, rear elevation, and then the riverside frontage elevation. Slightly the elevation indicated by the arrow is on the next slide. So that's the riverside elevation. The elevation indicated by the arrow to the right hand side of the slide is the actual elevation of the mill building itself. So it's not replicating it, but it's following the same design principles of the mill building itself in terms of the design concept of the scheme. So the new build element field does actually fit in and complement the mill building in its proposed siting and scale. This photograph shows the eastern elevation of the mill building and the structure known as the pug mill. There is one of these variations of the plan has been the installation of this timber fence, which is going to be reduced in height to make it a little bit more or less prominent in the street scene. The new build block goes in this. Let's go back. New build block goes in to the left-hand side of the site facing towards the mill building, and it's located in the approximate position here. That's why you saw on the slides the front elevation at 3-storey height and the rear elevation at 2 stories, because there is a change in levels. The building to the left-hand side is the barn structure. That is listed and has an extant consent as part of the neighbourhood consent to be converted into offices. That's retained as part of the current proposal. So that's the barn building indicated by the arrows. That photograph was looking across from the proposed access road across towards the site. This slide I mentioned earlier, the rerouting of the public right-of-way which crosses the site. There's actually 2 public rights-of-way which cross the site. There's one along the southern boundary which follows the line of the River Nid. Again, hopefully that arrow is indicated.
No. We can follow that.
I can't speak until look at the same place. Yeah, the idea it follows the southern route, the southern portion of the site. The northern footpath comes in from Harewell Close and follows the rear of the stable block to the rear of the building known as the warehouse, and through the residential properties located to the west of the site. The proposal is to relocate the right-of-way. Those with excellent eyesight should be able to see the green line, basically to link up with the southern right-of-way. There obviously still is the option for people to use the main access into the site should they wish to do so, i.e. walk along the access road. This provides a definitive route and links the right-of-way to the riverside frontage. This is a view taken from Harewell Close and shows the entrance or the exit to the public right-of-way, where you have to go down a flight of stone steps to the rear of the stable block, and it's a rough track immediately behind the stable block. That's retained as part of the scheme, and the diversion goes through the centre area of the site. This photograph shows the completed works, or almost completed works, of the main mill building. This is the internal courtyard with clock tower. This slide shows the former chimney that's been excavated and reinstated. This is one of the areas where there's a slight variation to the approved plan that following excavation they've had to amend the shared amenity space to what you see at the moment. Another variation from the approved plans was the use of vertical timber boarding to the parking area on the southern boundary of the site. This should have been good use of stone. When you look at it in terms of the context of the listed building, it's a natural material that's weathering in and doesn't have an adverse impact on the setting of the listed building. Equally, the topography and ground levels has resulted in a variation to the car parking area in the forefront of the picture, where previously again there was a retaining stone wall. It's no longer required due to topographical issues. Again, this is the gravelled area of the public right of way as you're coming off the main access road running through the village. So we have the river link to the right. The approved plans have railings along this frontage. We have a protected knee rail fence and additional planting, which again is considered to be appropriate to the heritage asset of the main listed building. You get the western elevation of the main mill indicated by the arrow there, so it's quite an imposing structure. And this is the garden area to the east of the mechanics store, adjacent to the wheelhouse. This was supposed to be a sunken garden, but again, because of difference in levels, it's now a level garden area with rockery. Again, it's not considered harmful to the setting of the listed building. In terms of updates to the reports, I have received one further letter of representation to the scheme. Which refers to the fact that the revised plans still do not meet the North Yorkshire parking requirements and there's still a shortfall of spaces. The report actually refers to that. There's a shortfall of 3 spaces, I think. But we've always had to try and get a balance here in terms of ensuring that the parking area doesn't become dominant in terms of the setting of the listed buildings. And there is a shortfall of 3 spaces. That's across the site as a whole. The applicants have provided additional parking spacing within this area. Hopefully that helps you. In the southwest corner of the site, the southeast corner of the site, behind the barn. For the sake of 3 parking spaces, the balance of judgments that we've made here is that the overall benefit of bringing back into use the listed buildings, an area of enhancement within the conservation area, would outweigh the small shortfall of parking in this particular instance. There's comment that the new build development is too large and would have an adverse impact on the setting of the listed building. I already referred to the fact that there has been an earlier listed building application for an earlier iteration of the scheme, which has been approved, which included a 3-storey development on the site of the new build element. I do have a slide of the consented scheme, which shows a comparison there that we've still got 3-storey development, 2.5-storey development, 2.5-storey development, and the rear elevation, eastern elevation of the building. And that's been deemed to be acceptable in terms of its impact on the setting of the heritage asset. The proposed scheme follows similar proportions, similar scale, and is equally deemed to be acceptable following consultation with the conservation and design team staff.
Should we go to questions?
There is just a couple of updates to the report that I've just got to run through. And that's clarification in the report's summary of paragraph 2.0, 12.1, where I make reference to the unilateral undertaking. That should actually read as a deed of variation to the section 106 agreement. At 10.92, the open space calculation, that should read £52,000 and not £520,000. Being a little bit naughty. So that's on the previous scheme. Conditions, there's just a couple of updates on conditions. In the condition 19, which covers the floodgates, just requires the scheme to be submitted and thereafter be implemented to ensure that it's enforceable. There's a couple of items which residents have raised which hasn't happened in phase 1 regarding scheme of lighting along the riverside frontage, pointing to the commercial premises. And again, I'll be adding an extra condition that prior to the occupation of the 32nd residential unit, a scheme should be submitted and approved in writing together with an implementation programme. The applicants have confirmed that they would accept the conditions to secure sustainable energy. It's not been considered as part of the development because there is a fallback position of the original enabling consent. And we've not had the opportunity to assess the impact of that. But what we can do is impose a condition requiring the submission of an energy statement as an additional condition because the scheme itself is introducing additional residential development, and that would accord with policy CC4. So I am recommending the imposition of an additional condition to cover an energy statement. Comments are still awaited, unfortunately, from the Highway Authority on the amended plans. I've already touched on the fact that there's a shortfall of 3 spaces, but I'm happy to make a balanced judgment there that, given the setting of the listed buildings, that's acceptable. And unfortunately, I've not received further comments from the footpath officer, who I believe is still the opinion that the surface material, would prefer an alternative surface material on the public rights-of-way. Public rights-of-way is from a track, and it's a difficult balance. What I wouldn't want is to just justify a refusal based on stone gravel on the public footpath rights-of-way. And that completes the presentation.
Okay, folks, what we're going to do is first we're going to have questions from the elected members to the officer presenting. Then we're going to hear from the objectors, hear from the parish councillor, hear from Councillor Murday, and hear from the agent from the applicant. So that's the order in which things are going to happen. So any questions first from members, not debate questions?
Yes, please. Yeah. Thank you. Could I just ask, where Section 106 legal agreements have been changed, have you discussed this with the Town Council? Because in my experience in my division, where this has happened, quite often the contributions to various areas would have been very much better if the Town Council had actually had a chance to discuss it.
Sorry, the physical Town Council. Do you mean North Yorkshire?
Yes.
North Yorkshire.
Yeah.
The triggers for the financial contributions were held within the original Section 106 agreement. Clearly, there have been 2 triggers which have been missed. Payments haven't been made and they've not been followed up. We've seen this application as an opportunity to restart the application process to avoid a potentially stalled application. They've not been discussed with the parish council. They've been formed part of discussions throughout the length of the application itself. But clearly we are, as referred to within the report, looking to alter those triggers to make them more accessible for the developer to make those contributions.
So your answer is no, it hasn't been discussed. Because I just think this is totally wrong when, it's all with the developer and it's not with the local people, the local parish council. That's why I asked that question, Chairman. The second question.
Could I hold up that question, just see if anybody else has got any follow-ups on Section 106? You can't, I'm afraid, do you? Anybody else on 106? Because I had 1 or 2 that might be relevant to this, but could you explain what the changes are between the original 106 and the new? I'd like to understand how the calculation was made of the latest contributions. They seem to have not gone up a lot, by comparison with the original one, and they seem to be quite low in the new one by comparison. What financial assessments were done to try and ensure that those were appropriate, those 106 agreements?
Well, the financial contributions being subject to consultation with both the educational department and also our own parks department. They worked out based on a formula in terms of the number of residential units and the amount of bedroom accommodation which is provided on the site itself. So whilst there might well be an increase in quantum of residential units on the site, there's been a corresponding reduction in the number of size of bedrooms in those units. So that may well have swept. I've not interrogated the figures to the nth degree, but this is how the commuted sums are calculated. It's an independent calculation done by both the education department and our parks department, and that's where these revised figures have come from.
And have we done any assessment of the developers' statements about where they're financially placed and how that's appropriate in terms of
the scheme itself, throughout the lifetime of the development, has been subject to 3 independent financial viability assessments. They do conclude that the Phase 2 section is the profitable element of the scheme itself, rather than the Phase 1 development. The developer has missed the first 2 payments. We're looking to redress that balance with an early contribution towards the education contributions, which has been agreed with the developer in this instance. We've had to take a pragmatic view to try and kickstart the development because it has stalled, and we're looking to we've heard today already the importance of bringing back into use heritage assets. And this is a clear example of trying to do so.
Sorry, Nick, I held you on question 1. Do you want to get to your question 2?
My other question was, do we know why they haven't kept to the original, the first 2 instalments of the Section 106 have not been made? Just again, in my experience of parish councils who are told one thing and then things change, and you know, they should be aware of it, because you know, if a planning application is approved and certain commitments being made, you know, it affects all the parishioners, I presume, of Paisley Bridge, and you know, if it's not been met, then that's a poor do.
I agree. The section 1, the original section 106 was signed with those triggers in mind. We are, however, where we are. Those triggers were missed and were not followed up by ourselves as a council. We have had, say, various financial appraisals submitted to us and by the developer, which has been subject to independent examination. We're having to take a pragmatic view here that to try and achieve or receive those payments from prior to the occupation of the 33rd, I think, unit for the education, 44th for the remaining contributions, to try and ensure that the site doesn't stall and we get development on this area of land which is identified for enhancement within the local land conservation area appraisal.
I think the developer has, had some, obviously, stumbling blocks during phase 1 with the conversion of the main listed building. It's a huge building and a very complex building to be converting because of the listed status of it, amongst all the technical issues with that site as well. And I think there's unforeseen issues have arisen in doing that have affected things. And as Andy says, really, it's phase 2 that's going to be the bit that generates any profit, because phase 1 has been so complex to deliver. So I don't think it's really done that.
Do members have any more questions on this specific? Because I've got 1 or 2. Anybody else want to go, David?
On the whole application?
No, just on this one specific point of the trigger triggers on the one I was saying, because I'd like to ask, what gives us confidence that those points will be reached and complied with? As I understand it, there's an early contribution for education at House 33, and there's a contribution to open space, or the full contribution to open space is made at Unit 44. What gives us confidence that those agreements will be complied with?
As with any Section 106 agreement, we are very much, it is an agreement between ourselves and the developer to make those contributions. We do have better compliant, when we have a Section 106 compliance officer now who's employed and we've never had in the past, which should be able to ensure that once the triggers are met, follow up pay, we can chase payments. That wasn't a situation previously.
Okay, I'll move on to Nick. Have you got further questions?
Well, no, I'm just very unhappy about.
But we'll tell that for debate.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Am I right? There's only one EV charging point on this site at the moment, or well, has it even been put in? Secondly, I thought it was the law now that every new development had to have supply EV charging points for cars. So I'm thinking 50 homes, even if there's just one EV charging point. How is that going to work down the line? Even next week, for example, because I made a visit myself. I looked at it this morning. There was some 30 homes occupied, something close to that. So a bit concerned. Am I right? Have I read that wrongly?
The original enabling consent had no EV charging points, but we've got to go back into history here because the application was originally submitted in 2007. I don't think we had any electric vehicles at that point, and it wasn't conditioned as such. There is actually one on-site, which we do have concern in terms of potential impacts on the setting of the listed building. But there's also a condition now. We've got an opportunity to look at that again over a period of time, because this is a Section 73 application. In effect, we will be issuing a new decision notice, although there's obviously the fallback position of the earlier consent. And there is a condition there which I'm proposing to attach that we do receive a scheme for electric vehicle charging points as part of the consent should members be willing to approve. It's condition number 29.
Right, okay, sure, can I just split that? So, are we saying every proposed unit from now will have access to an EV charging point, or how many will there be?
The wording of the condition is such that phase 1, there's no requirement to put any EV charging points. That consent was granted some time ago, and there was no condition covering that. Because we've now got Section 73 applications, phase 1 works are more or less complete. Phase 2 is yet to be started. The condition of the wording of the condition actually specifically refers to phase 2 developments, where we can attach the condition, because we've effectively issued a new decision notice in 2024, as opposed to way back when we originally considered the earlier permission. So we can attach it now. The issue with whether it's on every property, we've got to balance that in terms of practicalities, in terms of the setting of the heritage assets and listed buildings. We wouldn't, for instance, the devil's going to be in the detail in terms of the acceptability or otherwise.
Sorry, I keep hearing pragmatism, practicality, devil's in the detail. I keep hearing this. We can ask for EU charging points. What are we doing as a council here?
Could I hold at that, and we'll come back to that and debate, and you can make proposals and debate, because I think that's
okay. Sorry,
I think to explore the question. Anybody other? Nick,
Just another quick question. related to point 7.8. Well, the local highways authority, I presume that is North Yorkshire, is it? To say cannot support the scheme is quite serious, really, if they can't support the scheme as submitted because it fails to provide sufficient parking spaces. Now, are these the 3 cars you're talking about? 3 parking spaces?
That was on the initial submission. We then received a revised plan which provided the 8 additional parking spaces where we carried out reconsultation with the Highway Authority. They've not yet responded to the additional parking spaces. But with those additional parking spaces, the actual shortfall becomes only 3 parking spots. And the balanced judgment here has always been to try and ensure that the site doesn't become over-dominated by vehicle cars and parking. So with a shortfall of 3 parking spaces, a balanced judgment's being made that the benefit of bringing the buildings back into use, together with the new build and enhancement of this part of the conservation area, outweighs the loss of the 3 parking spaces.
But we discussed that in the debate.
Yeah, I understand that. But it's just that there's also a lot of comments awaited from various parties, and is this not therefore premature at this stage to bring this forward?
Shall we return to that in the debate?
That's the question.
So what was the question?
Is this premature because of all the things that
before the hours? Yeah. Well, I think I'd come back to that during the debate rather than that.
That was just a question.
Anybody else on that? Because I've got 2 questions if nobody else has got questions. I'd like to ask about the shop and where we are placed with the provision of the shops at the cafe that situation. What does the community get in terms of facilities that it hasn't got now when phase 2 is finished? What will be open and available to the public and to the villages that's not open now?
As part of the phase 1 development, there is a shop located in the basement of the main building, which is the southern aspect facing the River Nid. Part of the original section 106 required a marketing campaign for the potential sale of the retail premises. And that included that for the first 2 years it would be funded by the developers itself. That marketing campaign, whilst did attract interest from potential purchasers at the site, didn't go fully into the fact that it said a package deal would be available rather than the wording of the 106, which required funding for the first 2 years. So it hasn't been fully marketed in terms of how we would have anticipated it. So without, again, with the deed of variation, we will be trying to secure or ensure that marketing campaign is done in accordance with the section 106, the premises will be funded 2 years by the developer. We've also the trigger point of that because we've almost reached the point where under the original section 106 agreement we could then the development then start looking at alternative uses for the retail premises.
Okay, my second question is on footpaths. The footpath that runs past the frontage on the river, quite a the road use the public footpath. I've used it myself in the past. What guarantees that will remain open during the work processes? Is it something that can be retained all the way through the work, or is it at risk of being closed during the work?
Well, in terms of the completed works on phase 1, they're more or less there now in terms of the potential impacts on the footpath. There are temporary diversion. I'm not footpath officer, unfortunately, but that footpath is in situ at the moment. phase 2 works, which comprise the next stage of construction works, shouldn't actually impact on the route of the footpath. It's the phase 1 works which are the potential for blocking and intrusion, but they've been virtually completed.
Okay, so you're reasonably confident on that. Shall we go to then the speakers from the floor? We've got firstly Nigel Garfield from the objectors. You've got a strict 3 minutes, as I understand it.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of all of those who've raised objections, and more generally for all but one of the 30 current owners at Glasshouses Mill, many of whom are sat behind me. Don't intend to use the very limited time, note the 3 minutes, to revisit what were 27 public submissions, given that we trust that the committee have already studied these in detail. Regarding the principle of Phase 2 application itself, it's fair to say that there's broad support for this to happen. It's in everyone's interest for the whole development to be finally and successfully completed. However, committee will obviously have considered the range of elements of the plans which some people in their objections have raised as needing attention or improvement. For example, and you've just been touching on one of them, the size of the shortfall of car parking provision, not just for Phase 2, but considering Phase 1 and 2 combined, and also build density and other issues. Those of us who already own properties in Phase 1 feel very fortunate to live in such a wonderful setting and to have become part of the wider Glasshouses village community. We fully understand and appreciate the challenges, financial and otherwise, of delivering such a unique development while still making a commercial return. We recognise the planner's responsibility and obligation to employ best efforts to see developers succeed. And we understand that on occasions, reasonable modifications are necessary. And now the big but. But these things shouldn't be at the expense of the community or existing owners. Committee will have seen from all the objections a significant number of important Phase 1 works that remain outstanding, unfinished or at odds with the original planning conditions and obligations. Previously recognised by the planning team as breaches, these now appear to be accepted as regularised as built in this new application for Phase 2. And we're very concerned that the report to committee by the Assistant Director of Planning fails to adequately cover these specific outstanding issues. Left unresolved and outstanding, these works will have significant consequences. Financial consequences on existing owners unfairly facing significant future costs, which are costs that should be development costs and end up becoming repair or maintenance cost on owners. Health and safety consequences with ongoing risk of serious accident or injury with outstanding works, and consequences on the community of other things as well.
You've had 3 minutes, but you were 20 seconds introducing yourself.
Thank you.
20 seconds longer.
Thank you. Unfortunately, all our efforts to have Glasshouses 1, 2, 3 Limited fix these outstanding issues have proved unsuccessful. So our request of the committee is a simple one, that it helps avoid the consequences of these works remaining outstanding by making them preconditions of any approval for the Phase 2 development. And this will help avoid an acceptable precedent being set that will similarly and negatively impact future owners and the community once again.
That's you, I think.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, can we move to Councillor Joanna White, right from Bexley Bridge Town Council?
Mr. Chairman, she's just got to pop out to check.
Oh, okay, well, we're doing a different order. We'll do Councillor Moday.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank the committee and the planning authority for allowing this application to be heard by the planning committee, because as you've realised, there's a lot of contention about it, but it's also a really important scheme for glass houses. Those of you that know it will know that this mill is an iconic building. It's listed, and the development of it is very important. And the idea that the rest of it should be left as a derelict site, should phase 2 not continue, would be disastrous, actually. Can I also just say about the idea that the S106 monies has not been discussed at parish councils? It's been discussed at every Paisley Bridge Town Council for the last year, and indeed for the last 2 years, and indeed with representations from the developers at those meetings. So there's been widespread discussion. You've heard from residents that they have issues, understandable issues, with the phase 1 development, and I hope that those will be addressed, and of course they are addressed to an extent by this planning application. You also have to bear in mind that, as the planning officer, as Andy Huff has reported, that some of those difficulties are created by the fact that this is a listed building. From my point of view, and from the community's point of view, it's really important that this development is completed. The second part of my submission is to do with the S106 monies. You've heard that actually the S106 monies were expected to be provided within the phase 1, and that has not happened. But I think it's really important that we hear the timeline for the 3 parts of the S106 monies through the rest of the subsequent development. And I think we need to have that really tied down, and we're hoping that the representatives of the developers will provide that for us, because it's been relatively unclear, I think it would be fair to say, to Paisley Bridge Town Council and to the beneficiaries of the S106 monies exactly what the business end of it has been. I understand though now that it is possible for the developers to tell us the timeline for the provision of those S106 monies, and I think that's a very important thing for the committee to hear. I just want to reiterate again what an important development this is for the community. It comprises, with 50 units, comprises well over a 10% increase in the number of dwellings in the village, so it's very large in proportion. But it's also very important architecturally. And so far, apart from those snags which you've heard, and they're more than snags, I accept, so far the development, and those that have seen the development will see that actually it's provided a really good provision. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is Councillor Joanna Wright from Paisley Bridge?
Yes. Hi. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Paisley Bridge Town Council, and
sorry, do you mind?
Pardon?
Oh,
sorry, I thought it was on.
We'll start again.
All right, I'm speaking on behalf of the Paisley Bridge Town Council, so as such, this is basically a summary of the agreements that we've had in the Town Council over the past many months that we've been discussing this and the previous planning application. In general, we support the principle of the Glasshouses Mill development, and we're happy to see the heritage building restored and protected for the future. However, we object to this application on the following grounds: that phase 1 must be finished to the standards of the original plan, as specified in the planning conditions laid down in the original phase 1 planning approval. This planning application, this one here, should not seek to override those conditions. And this planning application should reference and provide clarity on how and when the phase 1 S106 obligations will be met. The community has waited long enough. The Town Council feels that the material considerations detailed in the objections submitted by its parishioners, Mr Neil Ashworth, Mr David Turley, and by the North Yorkshire Council Public Rights of Way team accurately reflects the Council's objections to this development. but it has no further objection to the changes made between the application that was submitted in March 2024 and the amended application received in June 2024, as opposed to the objections that we have to this current application which I've just outlined. As the concerns raised by the Town Council back in April in response to the March 2024 planning application largely still stand. The Council is unhappy with many aspects of this application and agrees with the residents' concerns. For instance, members of the public and Paley Bridge Town Councillors have noted that the site of the potential shop, which was supposed to be weatherproof, was in fact not at all, and you can put your hand through to the interior. And there's rats and greenery inside. Paley Bridge Town Council feels that the material considerations detailed... I've said that bit. Furthermore, Paley Bridge Town Council agrees that Phase 1 needs to be completed to the exact specification detailed in previous planning applications prior to the commencement of Phase 2. The Town Council objects to the attempt to alter and downgrade the Phase 1 planning conditions and specification as part of this Phase 2 application. Phase 1 and Phase 2 matters should be dealt with by means of 2 separate applications. The Council feels it is of the utmost importance that a condition needs to be imposed on the developer requiring release of the S106 money or a very significant instalment thereof to the community prior to commencement of Phase 2. The project now needs to be finished in compensation for the disruption provided to the village. The school remains the key beneficiary and it needs that money now. So, yes, so that's the summary of the Paley Bridge Town Council.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that just leaves us with the speaker from the applicant, if they would like to come forward. That's Graham Holder, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. Quite a lot to get through there, so bear with me. I just wanted to start, if I could, by adding a little bit of context to this proposal. The restoration of Glasshouses Mill has been an incredibly challenging project. The developers have been on site since 2016, since which they've had to navigate Brexit, COVID, serious political instability and the continuing war in Ukraine. So a series of black swan events in terms of the development industry. The impact has been an extended build period, a 2-year hiatus on sales, a shortage of materials and sharp rises in both construction and borrowing costs. It's actually been very fortunate that the funder for this scheme is Homes England, and they've provided the required flexibility to continue with the first phase of the development. As it stands today, the mill restoration is 99% complete. It's a high quality conversion which was widely praised by members at the previously arranged site visit. For the district, it is a real conservation success story. The purpose of the current application is to regularise the as-built development on Phase 1 and settle on the scheme for Phase 2 to bring the other buildings back into use. Now, the proposed Phase 2 have generally been well received by all parties, and as Andy has said, the majority of works already have listed building consent. However, planning permission is required for the developers to secure the necessary finance to complete the works, and this includes Phase 1. We're aware that local residents have concerns around areas of non-compliance and the delayed Section 106 payments. In this respect, firstly, it's quite common for changes to be made during the course of a development process, particularly for a complex site such as this one. The main planning consideration is whether the treatment of the external areas in this case is sympathetic to the listed building, but as the photographs have shown, they've been well executed, and this was confirmed by the Council's Conservation Officer during our last site walkover. On the Section 106, the restoration of the mill has been a loss leader for the developer. They took the decision to set the on the most challenging part of the scheme first, but as a consequence there are no funds available to meet the required contributions. We are in regular contact with the Parish Council and have agreed where the funds should be directed to first, which is the school, with no units being occupied in the second phase until that payment has been made. Similarly, the developers will continue to market the village shop, but without a willing operator, meeting this obligation is beyond their control. Previous inquiries have not come to fruition, but even now the agent is talking to 2 interested parties, so it is an ongoing process. The applicant, who is here today, is an experienced local developer. Despite the challenges, they remain committed to completing the restoration of the mill complex, bringing the rest of the buildings back into use and reconnecting this important part of the village. The reality, though, is the viability of the overall scheme is reliant on the amendments proposed in this application. Their intention is to be on site by the start of next year, and the projected build period is 24 months. Thank you.
Okay, shall we move to debate now? Does anybody wish to kick us off? I think Robert hasn't said a lot yet, so we'll let Robert come in.
It's not an easy decision to make, this one, and apparently we're told it's not an easy site. In fact, my impression is that it's been disastrous so far to what was promised at the outset. And that's so many years ago, right? Well, did we hear that it was 2016?
Yes.
Should have been finished years ago. What we do have on this site, though, we have no affordable dwellings, no public benefit at all there, no 106 money paid, and I've never come across in 40-some years that situation where no 106 money paid, so no public benefit, despite the vast majority of the residential units, and there are more than 1 or 2 dozen being completed and occupied. There's either been dragging their feet on paying that public benefit, or a severe financial miscalculation at the beginning of the development. And then today we are asked to give consent for extra residential units, rather reminiscent of the new Chancellor of the Exchequer. That again is to plug a financial hole somewhere. But it's whether one we should comply with, I doubt. But we're also asked to accept poorer overall social aspects. In fact, they're likely eliminated. And highway criteria on safety grounds being ignored. As far as I'm concerned, on this application in front of us, there's nothing in it I can support whatsoever. There's no guarantee at all. When you've developed most of your residential units and been unable to pay your 106 contributions, that a couple of handfuls of extra units, residential units, will generate sufficient profits to pay what should have been paid and what should have been some more additional 106 monies. I can see a scenario where they're not going to be paid at all, and whether this development is overall financially viable and won't lead to collapse or something, then I have grave doubts.
Okay, it's one view.
I can't support it in front of us.
Other views
Don't make sense.
Other views around the table? Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, this sort of thing happened in my division. No names, no background, but there was continued talk with the planning authority to try and get this sorted out, and eventually it was sorted. Now, that was in my apartment. I can tell the planning officer where that was, with a developer on 50-odd houses, and very similar, in fact. But I do have some sympathy with the people who are living in the dwellings in phase 1, because that happened in another part of my division, where the build quality was not very good and things didn't take place. Luckily, that has been overcome. But all I'm wanting to know is whether this is premature, as I said earlier, until the planning authority and the developer has sorted out what's going to happen, because it would be very remiss of us to prove something where, you know, everything goes into reverse and everyone suffers then. And I think that there's more that can be discussed between the developer and North Yorkshire Council before we approve the second phase. That's my view, I have to say. You know, there are such things as borrowing and all the rest of it that can be done to pay the commitments that have been made for phase one, if the whole thing is financially sound. Because I have some sympathy with what Councillor Heseltine has said, that, you know, we could be falling between two stools and the whole thing implodes.
Okay, other views?
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Heseltine. It is a difficult decision to make. You know, having heard the views of both supporters and objectors, I think it's interesting, you know, that Councillor Murday said that this development for the area, this development has to be finished. It has to be finished. What does surprise me is that Homes England are behind it. It doesn't bode well for the Totherham development here in Ripon, I fear. But yeah, I mean, they're not housing developers themselves, but they're usually the middle people between the developers. So, I mean, yeah, they are a responsible organisation and should be making sure that the conditions that were agreed in the first place should be carried out. With regards to S106, I mean, I think North Yorkshire Council must take some responsibility for that not having been paid, because the triggers have been there and we've done nothing about it to ensure that money has been paid. And quite rightly so, that the local community are angry about it, because, you know, as a former teacher myself, I know that schools need money. So yeah, I think it is a difficult decision, because I don't know whether we can attach conditions to this application that, as a precondition, that phase one, S106 money should be released first before phase two can commence. And I certainly agree with Councillor Murday that you need a timeline for the release of these funds. I personally am mindful to grant the permission so that it will be completed, but I do think we should have some very robust conditions in it, that the first phase is completed and that this 106 funding is released. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Norman David.
I think Councillor Williams going to have a good one here, isn't he? Very tricky. I agree with a lot that Councillor Heseltine has said. I have deep concerns about the state of the place. There seems to be some disagreement about the developer saying that what they have done is sympathetic, but we've seen pictures and with a visit this morning that things aren't entirely as promised, and I'm sure I can understand why residents are very unhappy about that, especially given the money they've paid out. I agree with Councillor Brodigan that Section 106 monies need to be paid before Phase 2 starts. What I'm not clear about is if Homes England are backing this, in what way they're backing it. I'd love, could anybody answer that? I mean, we can't go back to the speakers, but if Homes England are backing it, then surely the funding should be there for them to pay the monies as a government body. Yeah, I'll pass over to Councillor Heseltine for a minute.
There's so much uncertainty on this phase 2 that I can't support granting it today. I would wish it to be sorted out, the 106 monies, exactly what's going to be achieved and how it's going to be achieved and whether it financially can be achieved, whether Homes England is behind it or not, and all that requires a deferment today. And yours wasn't taken anything. I'll move deferment after the sector on that. Get it sorted out. Guarantee the social improvements and benefits to the existing people who put the money down and trying to live there amongst it all. And then we could progress from that. Then we're satisfied, but not before.
Okay, I'm going to try my contribution and then let the people in. Barbara, you go first and then on.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I would actually second that motion, even though I said that I would support this, because I do think, I strongly feel that these issues should be sorted out. And if they can't go in as a precondition of phase 2, then I would support a deferment until those issues are sorted out.
Okay, Dave, do you want to come in and
I'll go second, jump in second. I'm just concerned on so many levels, because Hastine put as well, that there are so many ifs and buts here, and they haven't been held to account for what they promised in the first place, which is not good for residents. I understand that we hear about phase 2 going to be the money spinner back for this development. It's also going to be difficult. But I would like to see a timetable for this. I'd like to see some backing from Homes England. I'd like some cast iron things that we can rely on, that the money will be there for the Section 106. That's because we've seen so many times before that that doesn't come forward. So I'd like to see some cast iron in black and white, promises, guarantees that this is viable. And if we go ahead as, I don't want to stop it. It's a great building, it's a great set of buildings, great location, but I'd like to see some cast iron guarantees that not just promises that the funding is there for Section 106, etc. And for the residents as well, that it's going to be done to the standard.
I'll do my bit and I'll allow people a bit of thinking whilst I'm doing it. The main bit of thinking I'd suggest people do is if you're going down the deferment route, exactly what are we asking officers to produce for the next meeting? Can you give that some thought whilst I put my tuppence in? Firstly, I think we all have a lot of sympathy with the residents that bought properties expecting the agreements to be complied with, things to be done exactly as said. It isn't always exactly as said when developers finish, and we are in a difficult position that when things have been built out, sometimes they are better, sometimes they are worse than the original design, and it's very difficult to head back and in realism and get everything ironed out. So I'm not hugely personally confident that we're going to succeed in getting every phase of phase 1 implemented by whatever agreement is come up with. You then look at where are we if the line is we say no because there's so much uncertainty, and I think I'm really listening very seriously to Councillor Murday. Basically, I looked at this site this morning. I've known it in the past when I've walked past it. I looked at it this morning. I thought that's actually a pretty good quality development. It's done to a good standard. There are things about it that might not be quite what was originally planned, but it actually looks very, very sympathetic. And you look around that area of the stable block and the old barn, etc., and it's a mess. And so clearly it is in the interest of absolutely everybody that we move this forward. However, we do not wish to be taken for a ride on people saying, I can't afford to do affordable, I can't afford to do 106, I can't afford to do this, I can't afford to do the other. Because if we do, then every developer that comes before us will say, I'm terribly sorry, I can't afford to do what I promised to do. So, we need to see, I think, set down in as much clarity as the officers can do, this is the agreement that is now going to be complied with, that gives us confidence those trigger points are going to be delivered, that the environmental gains we want are going to be delivered. And basically I think the committee's got understandable cynicism, and we want to have those assurances because we want you to move forward. We want this development to happen, but we have to be confident we're not going to see the community taken for a ride. And what's been delivered so far doesn't really give great confidence in terms of this agreement. So the actual what's built gives confidence. In terms of actually the payments and the triggers, doesn't give confidence. No.
Could you remind us all that the 106 agreement is a legal agreement entered into and signed by both parties. And what we have here is that legal agreement hasn't been upheld by the developer. In fact, they have defaulted. They have defaulted on major amounts of money for community benefits. And as Councillor Brogan points out, until we can get some guarantees on that, they shouldn't be allowed to proceed at all on phase 2. A mess has been created, wherever the blame lies, but a mess has been created. The public benefit shouldn't be the bit that pays for it.
I think
there's no guarantee in this life, Chairman, that anybody in business makes a profit. But being a developer on these sort of conditions is virtually a guarantee you can't make a loss.
I'm going to hand over to officer for a second, and I think we're thinking about the potential is for deferment, and it is what we're asking for precisely in the deferment. We need to be clear about.
Yeah, just wanted to just clarify first of all, it's set out in paragraph 10.96 of the report as to exactly when the triggers would be in the section 106 agreement that is proposed. Now clearly the triggers in the previous agreement haven't been met, but we've heard about how there have been complexities and unforeseen circumstances in delivering that. What we set out in 10.96 is basically the summary of what will go into the legal agreement, which will obviously be set out in a very formal way. It will be a standalone legal agreement, not a condition, because you obviously can't have financial contributions by condition. But as we've heard, the education contribution will be paid first, and that will be the whole contribution of £139,000, £139,359,000 whole contribution prior to the occupation of the 33rd dwelling, which I think we're on 31, I think now, aren't we? Sort of just under that. The open space and village hall contributions would follow further down the line, so prior to the occupation of the 44th dwelling, both of those, so 61,800 for the open space and 63,170 for the village hall's contribution. So those would be prior to the occupation of the 44th dwelling in the second phase, but these figures haven't just been plucked out of the air. They've been subject to quite a lot of detailed consideration of the arguments and viability issues that have been put forward by the developer. Concern if we sort of just say, right, we want all the money now at the end of before we get to the end of phase 1 now, is that we won't get it because it won't be viable given phase 1 hasn't really made that profit yet. So we will be getting the education contribution prior to occupation of the 33rd dwelling, which is obviously one of the ones that would happen relatively soon when things get going again, and then the 44th dwelling for the open space and village hall's contribution. There's also detail in there as well about what's proposed with respect to the village shop, but I just wanted to clarify exactly what was set out, just to clarify any confusion around when those triggers will be payable under what's proposed here.
Okay, so just I'm going to go to Nick and Sam, just to be clear first. What extra clarity are you seeking via a deferment? Because we can't do a deferment unless we're actually asking for something that is different to what's already provided to us today. Nick?
I'm not entirely convinced, Acting Chairman, that we've gone through the whole process. I mentioned earlier about the development in my site, and John Worthington was here, might have remembered this one. They went away and they looked at a third party, I think, looked at all the figures, looked at the books. That's the process, I think, that people follow when they want to change a Section 106 agreement or a condition. And I don't think they've got to that stage yet. And so has that process been followed to a letter, that they go to this other party who looks at all the financials and determines whether there is a case or not?
He said that's been done 3 times.
Sorry, I can't hear.
I think he said it's been done 3 times.
So could we clarify that question, because it's a very, very important question. I'm clear on the question and what the officers answer. Right. The question is very clear. Have we had an independent financial assessment of these new changes
and
that
the figures
sign them off as being realistic and honest and straight?
We've had 3 financial appraisals throughout the course of the application. Throughout the course of the application. That's going back to the initial submission and the later amendments which have been considered. The last financial assessment was made in 2022, which reiterated that phase 2 would be the profitable part of the site.
Chair, if that's the answer, all the things that happened on this other site were recent because I think I'm right in saying the education contribution would be to the education authority. The others are either commuted sums that go to the parish, or some of it goes to the parish. So there is a distinction there. But if the education contribution hasn't been made yet, then it's concerning. But the only question I'm asking really, if it's not been since 2022, then the process hasn't been gone through to the nth degree, as I understand it can be. Nick Turpin was involved. I had a meeting with him, a Teams meeting with him, and he explained that this other application had gone through the whole process, and that an external party had looked at all the figures that had been provided by the developer. Now, if that hasn't happened since 2022, then there's something not quite right.
Can I then clarify with the officer? You were present in the case that Councillor Brown is referring to.
No.
Okay.
I'm not here to...
Okay.
No, I understand that. You talk about it.
I think for me the difficulty is this, is that if we've been told there have been 3 independent financial assessments and that's what's resulted in the viability and the change in the documents, what are we asking for? Are we asking for that financial assessment to be done again? Which,
yes.
At what point, 18 months after it was done last time, it's quite challenging, I think, for us to date.
You said independent financial. I think you said financial viability. Who did these assessments? Was it Homes England? And ultimately, I'd want to see Homes England involved in it.
Submitted by the developer and then independently assessed by a firm called CP Viability, who we employ as an independent assessor.
What's the date on that one?
The last one was done 2022. We're now in 2024. And I think that needs to be done again.
There's a big difference between doing it in January 2022 and doing it December. So we've got a decision to make, members. Either we say that there has been a full financial appraisal that's been done independently, commissioned by us, that says that this is the only solution we're going to get, or we ask for it to be done again. And I think it's a judgment call to make members. I don't think there's any reason to say anything other than that. And I think if we are asking for a deferment, it would be solely on that basis, that there's a re-evaluation of the figure.
I think so. Not solely, Chairman, but with the argument that they get round a table with this assessment having been done by an independent party, but I think the name that you mentioned is the one that Harrogate has employed to do it. And you try and reach agreement between all parties. Now that could be done fairly quickly.
I'll just clarify it. So the two proposals on the table are deferment to have a further financial appraisal of whether the proposals by the developer are genuinely realistic and the only thing that can be achieved. And we want to see a full report to that effect, preferably to the next meeting. Or that we accept that the financial appraisals have been done and say we don't like it but we're going ahead. So those things are the two options, aren't they? I think people need to vote on that basis in a minute, probably.
I think, yes, I'm sure we should be looking for the comfort that the professional body that does the financial appraisal hasn't been involved in the previous one. It's a new set of eyes that look at it, and that would give me some confidence. If you just go back to the same person, of course they will justify what they said previously. And it was 22, and we're approaching the end of 24 now. So get it up to date, bring it back.
So let's be clear. We have a proposal on the table seconded for deferment, and the deferment is for a more up-to-date financial assessment of whether the trigger points are now the only realistic way to build out this development. That's basically the request.
Absolutely, under the process that has been set by the planning department.
We would not be able at the next meeting to come back and say we've got something else we want to raise. This is the only thing we could raise unless you raise it now. Dave.
I asked about EV charging points. If I was buying a house tomorrow, I'd expect an EV charging point, and there are 20 more houses, and it says that the EV charging point isn't there. It has since been deleted from the scheme. I think people nowadays expect it standard. Is that the sort of thing going to be in the...
Could I suggest that the second thing we asked for is that the officer talked about getting an energy statement that would clarify the situation with solar panels, and they could cover the EV charging points at the same. So we would see the energy statement as well. I think those are the 2 points we've had raised. Anybody else got any other points? In each case, I'll vote on the proposal for deferment for those 2 things. Those in favour of deferment? Don't think I need to express a view, so I can leave it at that. 4-0 for deferment.
At that point, I will
gladly hand over the chair to my much more expert colleague.
Sharing. Jerry?
when I read the report, when I went and visited the site, I can understand him being good, read all the stuff, and then you can't get involved to find out what we're doing.
Okay, thank you everyone. Hopefully we can deal with the next 2 items in record time.
Yeah. No, it's going to give you a hard time.
So we're going to go over to what was agenda item 6 is now agenda item 7, which is the application inspector of Temple Gardens in Ripon. And I understand that Amina Jones is the case officer.
Yeah, that's correct. Amina Jones is going to present these 2 items. Emily Brown, the original case officer, is away. I'm also conscious we've already had a bit of confusion with 2 Browns already, so the third might have just been a little bit much for us. So Amina Jones is here.
Browns and Joneses, there's too many of us.
Well, we had Mills on the last item, and Mills here as well. So.
Before you kick off, Chairman, matter of procedure, when it's minuted, it should be minuted that you change the order, but they should go down. We're now discussing item 7 on the agenda.
Yeah.
You can't change the agenda, you change the order, but not the agenda number.
You make a very good point.
It's been there before.
Okay.
What the man says.
Good afternoon, everyone. The following case being brought forward for your consideration concerns the general upgrading of Temple Gardens in Ripon. This case is brought to committee due to the fact the applicant is North Yorkshire Council. The site is located within the Ripon Conservation Area to the north of Allhallowgate between the Telephone Exchange and Sherlow View. This space provides public amenity space within the city centre of Ripon and is shown as local green space on the neighbourhood plan. The proposal seeks to replace gates and gate posts, installation of fencing to the south entrance and removal of timber fencing to the west boundary to be replaced with iron fencing. The works would also include the removal of broken bench seating backs and replacement with recycled plastic boarding, retaining the existing metal bases and the installation of high-level CCTV in the interest of site security. The proposal consists of a series of works to open up the views through the gardens and improve security, including the removal of 6 trees on the site. It's considered the proposed works will improve the amenity of the area and comply with local plan policies HP3 and HP4, as well as neighbourhood plan policies F2 and C3, and policy in the National Planning Policy Framework. There's been no further updates since the report was circulated, and that brings me to the end of the presentation. Have you got any questions?
Any questions, Philip and Nina? Can I ask a quick question? Why do we need to remove the trees?
I think it's just in the interest to just open up the space and kind of like give a bit more visibility and sort of site security.
Yeah, it's just with the when you look at this into this park from Allhallowgate at the minute, the Lalande trees sort of block the views in through it, so taking them out will help to open that view up in the interest of site security. They are just dilapidated, so they're not really.
That was my next question.
Yeah, we don't like it. I think it's also referenced in the report as well. There's actually been a separate notification for tree works as well, which has already been agreed to remove them. So there's already been a separate agreement for them to be removed anyway, but they aren't of any value.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Just a quick one. They seem to comment about trees quite a lot in Ripon. Has the Civic Society commented on this?
No.
Or any other body?
No, we just have the objections referenced in the report.
Okay, thank you.
Like 200-year-old beech tree, is it?
I had to mention trees tonight. So the tall blocking trees, you don't like them. Was there thought about some smaller, like fruit trees or something instead, that wouldn't block the view? I see 3 little small ones there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some trees on the site, aren't there? Yeah, there are some existing trees on the site, and I suppose what isn't entirely clear from there is that actually along that elevation where the trees are coming out is there's actually a series of gravestones along there, because this was a former burial ground before it became a park. So I think I've got the photo. Yeah, you can see in there, that's along that side there, there's some gravestones along there, so I suppose there's limited probably opportunity for planting there because of the presence of the gravestones and not trying to cover them up, and I think if there was to be any further planting on here, it would probably be fairly low level because of the security issues that were mentioned.
Anyone else with any other comments?
Are we, sorry, at the comment stage? Or?
We're in the comments for Amina, we're not
Oh,
in debate yet.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you, Amina. I do have down on here that there are two speakers, Councillor Horton, who's left, I think, and also Andrew Birmingham. Do you want to speak?
I'll be very quick. So just to pick up any queries again. So the trees that we've applied to remove are mainly ivy up the side of the building and the Leylandii tree. The application has been brought forward because of lots of antisocial behaviour in this park. So that side is to be cleared just to allow the long view through from the public highway. And there are a series of small trees that have been planted along the 4 or 5 graves. You can only just see the 2 on that left-hand photo. I think there's 4 along that side. So we're not tree haters. It's just on the left-hand side of that building, and to the left of where the photo was taken from. It just shields the view through, which is where the problems have been occurring.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Birmingham. So if we're going to go to debate, Councillor Rodigan.
Thank you. Yeah, once again, I'm the division member for Temple Gardens, and I welcome this application because, as Andy just alluded to, there's a lot of antisocial behaviour, particularly in this park area, and hence the need to replace, benches and fences and things like that because of the vandalism that has actually gone on. So I welcome the fact that they're going to be replaced with something that's perhaps a bit more robust, and hopefully installation of CCTV may, if it doesn't deter the vandals, may at least identify them so the police can lock them up, basically. So yes, I understand why the trees are being taken down, because it's well, one, they're not indigenous anyway, but 2, they do help to conceal those who vandalise the area. So I think it would be a huge improvement to what is a rather nice secluded garden. So I would support the application.
Councillor Andy Brown.
Yeah, just 2 very quick points. Firstly, Leylandii have very little wildlife beneath them because they shut out so much light and suck so much moisture out of the soils. So kind of, I think it would be great mooring for the Leylandii. On the other hand, when it comes to the ivy, I think a good ecologist should say save the bees, really, because could you just please guarantee you don't cut it down in autumn? Incredibly valuable for honeybees to get ivy flowers in autumn. It's one of the ways they get through winter. So please don't cut it down in autumn. Other than that, I'm going to propose approval.
Does North Yorkshire have a bee policy?
I don't know. Should we find out?
I'll second that. Have you seconded it?
I proposed.
You proposed. What do you seconded?
Well, I'm not sure if we do have a big policy, but actually we were walking in Temple Gardens this morning, and there were a couple of views in there, which was, just timing, wasn't it really? But we did actually see some bees in there, didn't we? So yes, the bees were alive and well.
So don't cut back in autumn.
Can I ask you, are you asking for that to be conditioned?
No.
Yeah.
It's a bit of common sense.
I'm asking people to listen. That's all.
Right, okay. Would anyone else like to make any comments? In which case, do we have a proposer and a seconder?
I'll propose.
Councillor Brodigan proposing, Councillor Andy Brown seconding. So all those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Leader, back over to you now, please.
We get a prize for the quickest presentations.
Yeah.
Endearing love of all members. Enjoy.
So the next case for your consideration today concerns a site at Brimhouse Farm in Euston. The site is located within the Nidderdale National Landscape and is brought to committee as the agent is the Nidderdale National Landscape, who are part of the North Yorkshire Council. The application site is located approximately 600 metres west of Eveston and within the Nidderdale National Landscape. The proposal site itself is shown here outlined in red. As you can see, there are public rights of way near the site, but this proposal would not impact them. The proposal seeks full planning permission for the creation of 2 wildlife ponds within agricultural pasture south of the main farm. The creation of ponds is part of a wetland creation project which is being facilitated by Nidderdale National Landscape and funded by a Farming in Protected Landscapes grant scheme. The objective of the scheme is to create a new wildlife pond with clean water to benefit a range of freshwater plants and animals. The main pond would be 101 square metres with a maximum depth of 1 metre in the middle. The filtration pond would be 54 square metres with a maximum depth of 60 centimetres. The ponds are considered to be features which will integrate well within the wider rural landscape with the potential to enhance biodiversity. It is considered that the proposed works will comply with local plan policy GS6, NE3, NE4, HP3 and HP4, as well as paragraph 180D of the National Planning Policy Framework. There's been no further updates since the report was circulated. To the end.
Does anyone have any questions? No, go ahead and sign.
So we have an officer at North Yorkshire that's been facilitating this. Is that right?
Yes, we've got an officer at North Yorkshire, basically in the Nidderdale National Landscape team, whose role is specifically as a wetland creation officer. There's a big scheme to both enhance existing wetlands in the Nidderdale National Landscape and create more wetlands as well. And it's a scheme which is being funded through the DEFRA scheme for farming and protected landscapes as well. So yeah, we're having to facilitate it.
So the application is submitted then by Mr. Alex Wiggley. Do we take it then that gentleman's a farmer?
Yes.
The owner, occupier or tenant?
The owner, I think they took it on last year, I think, from what I understand. It's grazed with sheep at the minute, that field.
Well, for the stated aims of why the pond is needed, what's worrying me just rather more than it should do is there will be people, maybe not now, in the future, who farm that land, who might use that pond for wider purposes. It'd be ideal for flighting ducks, and duck shooting goes with that, and shooting wildlife is hardly compatible with the aims of the application. Can we legally tie that down that there's no sporting rights attached to it?
Well, there is because basically there's biodiversity net gains involved with this application. There is a plan which will be tied down to basically maintain it as the ponds which is being proposed for. So there's a 30-year plan effectively that's standard for these things to ensure that it is retained, and managed accordingly for biodiversity purposes.
Well, that doesn't include not shooting wild animals, wild birds.
I'm not sure that's something that we can consider, because if somebody already has sporting rights over that land, you can't really usurp those rights because they continue in perpetuity.
There's no hand granting consent for a pond out in open countryside like that, and then it's used for commercial purposes.
I think the application
With
itself,
the commercial purposes would be shooting wildlife.
The application itself, if I'm not mistaken, is just for biodiversity reasons. It's not for commercial, for raising of birds to be shot, which would be a separate application altogether, presumably.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. It's purely about creating, ponds for wildlife purposes, and as I mentioned, it's being supported by funding from DEFRA under the Farming Protected Landscape Scheme, and if it's got to be eligible for that scheme, it's got to be doing one of four things. It's about supporting nature recovery, mitigating the impacts of climate change, providing opportunities for people to discover, enjoy, understand the landscape and its cultural heritage, or to protect or improve the quality and character of the landscape or place. So it wouldn't be, being facilitated. It was going to be for those other purposes.
Could we have a legal opinion on what I'm looking at, please?
Well, if I understand correctly, Councillor Heseltine, what you're proposing is that or asking is if we could grant plan permission and impose some form of conditional legal restriction which would preclude commercial sporting activity from taking place, specifically wildfowl or game bird shooting. With any condition, any planning condition, is subject to, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but it bears repeating, is subject to a series of tests which are comprised in the National Planning Policy Framework, and those tests include that it has to be necessary, has to be relevant to planning, it has to be relevant to the development that is being proposed, has to be precise, has to be enforceable, reasonably in all other respects, I think is the sweeper thing. I think looking at the nature of the proposal, it's a biodiversity application, it's going to be managed as a biodiversity asset. There are management schemes, so there are controls to that extent. So I think that something we specifically sought to restrict those sorts of riparian activities, I'm not sure, I'm not confident that that meets those tests.
Could I suggest that what's being asked for, we had the end of the sentence only.
Can I ask, are you asking for some kind of prohibition on using the ponds for the purpose of breeding ducks for commercial purposes that can be shot? Just trying to narrow down exactly what you're asking for.
I sound like the president at Duck Preservation Society, you know. And I like eating duck.
Just to clarify, if it helps on condition 4, which is I'm sort of skirting around it, the condition about biodiversity net gain, that does say that the created and/or enhanced habitat specified in the habitat management and monitoring plan should be managed, maintained and monitored in accordance with the approved habitat management monitoring plan for basically 30 years upon completion of the creation. So there is something on there that would help to ensure that it is used for the purposes that have been set out. If also we were looking at some of the uses that I think were being mentioned that might actually require separate planning permission anyway, that we'd have the opportunity to assess at the right time if there was a formal use that was going to be established for some sort of commercial, I don't really know quite how to describe it, but some sort of more commercial or leisure opportunity or shooting or whatever. So I think there is the reasonable planning controls over it.
I've done my best with duck.
The intensive duck breeding programme. Councillor Mid-Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. All I would say is that shooting is a legal sport. I don't shoot anymore. I used to do, and I used to love to eat a good mallard or a teal or what have you, which is delicious. But all I would say to Councillor Heseltine is that all the shooting people I know are hugely conservative, conservationists, and
you're right.
are hugely conservationists.
Are we still alive?
Are hugely conservationists, and I'm reading this. It doesn't seem to mention shooting at all. But if it did, I'd be in favour of it, because I think most sports people are game or whatever, wildfowl, are conservationists.
I would have thought that shooting had already established use anyway, predates the 1960 Act in itself.
Correct.
I would have thought, but I think there's danger of going down a rabbit hole here.
Not wishing to duck the issue. The biodiversity net gain statement, it includes a schedule of what should be done. I think to back Councillor Heseltine in these efforts to save the ducks, since he backed me in my efforts to save the bees, could we just ask the officers to look at that statement and make sure it's watertight on ensuring that this site is not used for mass breeding of ducks to be shot by amateurs who can only shoot them in a pond.
I was reading the habitat management monitoring plan this morning, and this is entirely aimed at basically trying to improve the biodiversity, particularly good habitat for invertebrates, amphibians as well, and it will be colonised by wildflowers around it as well. So it's all genuinely set out as all the right intentions, and the plan that's set out here will be managed in that way for 30 years.
So with that assurance, can I propose approval?
And I'll second it.
Okay, so all those in favour? Any against? No. Thank you very much. So that's right. So item 9. Any other items? Is there anybody who would wish to bring anything under any other business? Nobody? Okay, right. Thank you very much for everyone for attending today, and for the officers as always for your assistance. The date of the next meeting at the moment is Monday the 30th of September at 1 o'clock at 1 p.m. The venue will be confirmed in due course. Thank you everyone today.
Is that Monday or Tuesday?
Monday. We're going to